Well, welcome back to the Jacob Hornberger Show. Nice to be here with y'all again, the Freedom Oasis, where you breathe nothing but pure, unadulterated libertarian air for 1 hour of the week, 7 to 8 p.m. every Saturday night. Somebody sent me a really interesting email this past week and asking me a question. The question was, can you explain to me what you say when somebody asks you what a libertarian society would look like? And I thought it was such a fascinating question and such a profound one that I thought I'd start out by talking about that. And then delve into that, review some of the principles that we've discussed in previous shows, and then talk in terms of what a libertarian society would look like, and then kind of move into the WikiLeaks scandal or controversy or whatever, because I think it's so revealing, that controversy, as to the great divide between libertarians and non-libertarians, status, if you will, that goes on in life today. So let's start out with that question of what would a libertarian society look like? Well, let's first review what the status quo is, the kind of society in which we live, because that then gives us a frame of reference to what a libertarian society entails, and then once we see what a libertarian society entails, we can try to imagine what it would look like. All right, well, what's the status quo? Well, we've all been born and raised under a system in which we have a managed economy. Right? I mean, that's what we hear all the time, that the Republicans are accusing President Obama of mismanaging the economy. And of course, the Democrats say the same thing when the Republicans are in power, that you've mismanaged the economy. So whoever is in charge is managing the economy. And they do it in all kinds of ways. You know, they're studying the data. They've got bureaucracies watching things and monitoring things. And they've got the Federal Reserve, doing open market operations, inflating the currency, contracting the currency, and it's all, watching the jobless rate, entering into free trade agreements with other countries. And so you've got this huge federal bureaucracy that is managing the economy. Okay? That's what we've all been born and raised in, a centrally managed economy. All right, we also have the controlled society, a tightly controlled society. That is one in which the federal government is charged with controlling the peaceful activities of the citizenry. The best example, you see that, for example, in the Securities Exchange Commission, tightly controlling, the investment world, the stock market. You see it in the banking industry, where you've got banking regulators, that terrify the bank presidents and the bank personnel whenever they walk into the office, because they're going to go over there and check all the rules and regulations and see if they're complying. We've got OSHA and EPA, and probably the most prominent form of control comes in the drug war, which of course has been going on for some 30-something years. You couldn't find a better disaster of a government program, in terms of death and destruction and infringements on liberty, than the drug war. And it just goes on and on and on. It doesn't matter what a fiasco it is or how many deaths. In Mexico, they've got now some 30,000 people killed in the last just 3 or 4 years alone. It's absolutely incredible. And I guess you saw where Willie Nelson got arrested traveling on an interstate highway, and he hits a Soviet Union type checkpoint, down there in the southwest in Texas, near the border. Now he wasn't crossing the border, mind you. He wasn't coming from Mexico into the United States. He was going from west to east on an interstate highway that parallels the border. And he runs into one of these checkpoints, these Soviet Union type checkpoints. Now, if you've never seen these things, you're in for a real rude awakening if you ever travel to the Southwest. You're just driving along thinking you're in America, and all of a sudden you come over the crest of a hill and you see this huge, ominous-looking checkpoint that makes you think you're going into another country, and you have to ask yourself, my gosh, did I accidentally cross into Mexico? Because you're now, going into this checkpoint where they have Border Patrol, DEA, Customs, Homeland Security, the whole kit and caboodle. And so, they catch Willie Nelson at one of these things, and they've charged him. They're saying that the probability is he's going to jail. This isn't his first brush with the law. The IRS went after him, another paragon of freedom, sarcasm there. They say he's going to have to serve some time. Now think about this. Here's a guy that is doing nothing worse than just possessing a substance that they don't approve of. Now, okay, it's not alcohol, which they approve of, that's okay, or tobacco. It happens to be dope, grass, marijuana, whatever. And they want to put him in jail for probably doing bad things to himself. Now, the mere fact that he was possessing it doesn't necessarily mean that he'll be smoking it, but the likelihood is. But that's their mindset, that this mindset of control. This is a controlled society in which we live. All right, then there's the mandatory charity. I mean, we've all been born and raised in a society in which compassion, caring, charity is mandated. Now, we're talking about the welfare state here. Social Security. No fund, as we've talked about in previous programs. It's a straight confiscate and transfer program. They take money from the productive, they give it to the elderly. And then there's Medicare and Medicaid, another socialistic program, from each according to ability to each according to need. That was what Karl Marx said. And that's Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, all the transfer programs do. They take from those who have the money in order to give it to those that don't have the money. And it's all by coercion. There ain't anything voluntary about this. You don't participate, and you're going to end up in the same place that Willie Nelson's going to end up in, and where he could have ended up when he had those income tax problems with the IRS. They don't fool around with this mandatory charity business. You're forced to participate in this system, and hey, they tell you that it makes you a good and caring person anyway, And then you've got the foreign aid, the aid to dictators and other things. I mean, that's part of this mandatory charity. You got the SBA loans, the education grants, the community grants, where the congressman go home and they say, I'm here to announce a jobs grant for your community, jobs for your community, and they build a community center, and it's all free, and the local press goes gaga over how effective their congressman is. Well, it's all part of this concept that we live in a society where the government has this mandatory charity system in place. And then we live in a society where the government is the world's policeman. I mean, it polices the world. It's got bases all over the world, 700 to 1,000 bases all over the world, some of them quite gigantic. And it's to project power, to dominate, to effectively control, not here just in America with all their rules and regulations, but to control what's going on in the world. So that's the kind of system we have. It's a system of a managed economy, a mandatory charity, controls over activity, peaceful activity, and a international policeman role for the federal government. Now, what has this system produced? Well, it's nothing but crisis and chaos and perpetual war and preparation for war, and everybody's always on edge in this kind of society. Everybody's afraid, they're tense, they're irritable, there's road rage. I mean, because there's constant crisis. I mean, you can't even rest, sometimes without the new crisis. I mean, did you see the new crisis in Korea? And of course, it's all the North Koreans' fault that they shot some artillery shells at this island. But notice the mainstream press never goes a step back and says, well, what happened before that? You see? And of course, what happened before that is that the U.S. and the South Koreans decided to have military exercises on an island right next to North Korea. You can check it on the map, right next door. And then fired artillery shells into the water near North Korea, and of course then they retaliate and fire right at the island. Now, you can say, well, they shouldn't have done that. Maybe that the North Koreans shouldn't have done that. They should have shot their shells in the water too. Granted, nobody's going to dispute that. But we all know that it's a weird, unpredictable, just bizarre regime. So why go and do these things? I mean, what's the point of it? What's the purpose of it? Well, this is the crisis environment, you see, because then when you get into this crisis mode, then you forget about what's going on with respect to out-of-control federal spending, out-of-control debt, the inflation that is now the Federal Reserve is engaged in. And I guess you all saw where the Fed, when all the secret documents came out, or at least some of the secret documents that they were fiercely opposing the release of, it showed that during this latest banking crisis around the world, they've been lending money to all these foreign regimes. Imagine, trillions of dollars they've been lending money. They're like the banker, the lender of last resort to all these European regimes. Did you know about that? Did Congress know about it? Did the president know about it? Did you see it debated in any of these campaigns for office? No, because this is a highly secret regime that is over there doing these things. And but you see, it's all this crisis and chaos wherever you go. Monetary crisis, dollar cratering, debt crisis, fiscal crisis, Korea crisis, Iraq crisis, Afghanistan crisis, and of course with all these crises, people forget, about their attitude toward the government, that they're angry over the out-of-control spending, they're angry about what's going on at the airports with the body groping and the body scanning and stuff. But all of a sudden, when a crisis starts, everybody rallies to the government. And, of course, Madison, James Madison, the father of the Constitution, pointed this out. It was a favorite trick of the Roman Empire, that whenever the citizenry got restless over the out-of-control spending, the taxes, the regulations, because they had an empire too, as you know, the Roman Empire, the Roman officials, they knew the game. They just stir up a crisis overseas, It wasn't terrorists then, it was barbarians. But they would provoke the barbarians, like on the German border or something, and all of a sudden they'd say, the barbarians are coming, and everybody get all upset because the barbarians were coming, and so, there went the tax revolt, there went the rebellions, and so forth. So the crisis is a great benefit for those in office, the status. And so we live in a place, Ludwig von Mises called it planned chaos. Okay? That's really what it is. We live in a society in which there's planned chaos and planned crises. You have bankruptcy and Social Security, healthcare costs soaring with Medicare and Medicaid, Iraq and Afghanistan a total mess. The dollar's crazy. So constant crisis, constant turmoil. All right, well then, what would a libertarian society look like? Now, statists look at us and they say, they'll say stuff like, well, what's your plan for Iraq? And we'll say, we don't have a plan for Iraq. Well, what's your plan for Afghanistan? We don't have a plan for Afghanistan. Well, what's your plan for managing the economy? No plan. Well, what's your plan for the dollar crisis? We don't have a plan. Well, you see, this drives them crazy. Because you see, what they want us libertarians to do is to join them in their statist box. Now, remember a couple of sessions ago I talked about this statist box, where everybody's in this statist box, and they don't know it's a statist box, or some of them do, but most people, the average person doesn't know it's a statist box, because written all over the walls on the inside of the box is freedom and free enterprise, freedom and free enterprise. You live in a freedom and free enterprise society. And so what they want us libertarians to do is to come into the box and show them how to make the statism work, or in their minds, how to make freedom and free enterprise work. Well, we don't have any interest in doing that as libertarians. Because one thing, we don't believe in statism. We think it's morally wrong. But we also have a grip on reality. We know it's statism under which we were born and raised. We've broken free of the statist box, at least mentally, psychologically, in terms of having a reality of what we live under, and an understanding of it. And we know that statism is inherently defective. So we're not going to sit here and give you your plan on how to fix things in Iraq, or how to fix things in Afghanistan, or how to fix things in the dollar crisis, or the Federal Reserve, or how the Federal Reserve should manage its affairs, or how to save Social Security, or reform it, or fix it. That's not what we're about. We're not about making statism work, or trying to figure out how to save statism, and so forth. What libertarianism is the absence of all these things. It's the absence of foreign occupations. Okay, it's the absence of an occupation of Iraq. The absence of occupation of Afghanistan. So notice, libertarians aren't going to say, this is what you need to do to make Iraq a success. This is what you need to do to make your occupation in Afghanistan a success. What we're saying is, don't ever invade in the first place, but stop the occupation. Just get out. And is it still a mess? Sure. I mean, that's what your invasion did. But you're not going to fix it by continuing the occupation. In other words, it's the absence of invasions, absence of wars of aggression, absence of occupations. In fact, the absence of an empire. In other words, no role for the government to be the international policeman, meddler, regime changer, invader, occupier, or whatever. It's like no military-industrial complex, no big standing military. It's simply a republic, a constitutionally limited republic, where the government is limited, its powers are limited to protecting against a possible invasion, which of course is a non-existent possibility today because no nation state has the money. I mean, everybody's broker than we are. Nobody's got the military means to invade the United States. So, there's one part, is the absence of an interventionist, imperialist foreign policy. On the domestic side, the absence of a drug war. We would repeal it, get rid of it, get rid of economic regulations. Free trade agreements, it's nonsense. It's not free trade when you're negotiating it's managed trade, it's controlled trade. If you want to talk about free trade, all you got to do is just unilaterally drop your trade restrictions, which means dropping your controls on the American people, leaving the American people free to trade with whomever they want. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that some other country is going to do the same thing, but it doesn't matter. All that matters is you're freeing your citizens to trade and travel and engage with the people of the world. What other regimes do, that's their business. Now, mandatory charity. Libertarians believe in the absence of mandatory charity. I mean, just the whole idea that you're coercing people to be good and caring is ridiculous. I mean, coercion and compassion are opposites. It just seems, for libertarians, this is black and white. I mean, it's a moral principle. It's wrong for me to take somebody's money by force to give it to this person, even if I don't keep any of it. Let's say I go give it to all the sick people and the poor people in the ghetto, but I'm stealing it. I'm going in, breaking in homes, I'm stealing money, and then I'm going out and redistributing it. I mean, for libertarians, it's just black and white. That's just wrong, even though I'm putting the money to good use. Well, it's no different with the government, and this is where the statists have a blind spot, is that they think, no, if the government's doing it rather than a private thief, then everybody becomes good and caring in that society. The taxpayers and the bureaucrats and the IRS agents and the president and the Congress. Well, this is nonsense. So we would have an absence of any kind of welfare state programs, including Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, foreign aid, no more aid to dictators, and SBA loans, no more, loans to foreign regimes. We would have the absence of a central bank. In other words, a total free market in money, in which people would be free to engage in any kind of medium of exchange that they wish, gold, silver, or whatever. Now, notice how different this society is then. You've got a society in which people are free to keep everything they earn. Okay, because there's no more income tax. There's no more, IRS worrying about your deductions and trying to figure out all your little tax loopholes and stuff. There's none of that. You go, you get your paycheck at work, or you own your own business, you get that check, it's all yours. You do with it as you will. So you decide how much you want to save, how much you want to spend, how much you want to, invest. You make the call. It's all up to you. You engage in economic transactions with people. You either go to work for businesses, or you open up businesses, or you do both. And you're free to travel to any country. You're free to trade with anybody. Like, let's say you want to go to Cuba. You just go and you transact business, and you engage in cultural exchanges, or you just tour, whatever. In other words, there's no controls on you. There's no controls on any peaceful activity. That every person, every family is free to live his life the way it wants, so long as its conduct is peaceful. No murder, no rape, no theft, no robberies, no fraud, and so forth. But other than that, this is a libertarian society, okay? And where the role for government is extremely limited. I mean, where it's to punish the murderers and the rapists, guaranteeing them due process of law and so forth, and protecting in the unlikely and remote case if there was ever an invasion. So, that's an entirely different society. Now people say, oh, you libertarians are so idealistic, that could never be. Well, not necessarily. I point out that okay, take for example the late 1800s in the United States. Not a perfect society. You can't reach perfection. It's impossible. There was a lot of interventions, a lot of restrictions, a lot of government business type getting into bed with each other. But just to show you that it is possible to live in a society without these major interventions, Americans lived without income tax. In fact, Americans lived without income taxation for more than 100 years. And believe me, people say, oh, well, that's not possible. Well, it is possible. And by the way, there was a federal government the entire time. So they'll say, oh, well, you couldn't, that would be no government if you didn't have nonsense. No income taxation for more than 100 years. No welfare state. No Social Security. No Medicare. No Medicaid. No drug war. No economic regulations to speak of. I mean, you can point to some, but by and large, it's pretty much a regulation-free life. No immigration controls. I mean, people were free to flood into the United States, and they did. I mean, there was a little tuberculosis inspection, but most people didn't have tuberculosis, and so they were just flooding in. In the Southwest, after the United States took the northern half of Mexico and absorbed it in the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848, there was completely open borders. I mean, of course, this had been, the northern half of Mexico, the states of Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, and California, parts of Colorado. So people were traveling back and forth. There was no international police role for the United States. It was a republic. There was no standing army. There was a minimal military force, but quite minimal. There was no military-industrial complex. None of the people feeding off the state, all the contractors and all the weapon systems, and the government wasn't in the business of selling armaments and becoming the biggest arms seller in the world. So you really had a different kind of society, and my only point is that it's possible to achieve a society. And by the way, this is what Americans would celebrate on the 4th of July, this kind of life. This is what they called freedom. This is what they called free enterprise. Now, this is the kind of life that libertarians want, a way of life where people are free to engage in transactions, trade, accumulate wealth, decide for themselves. Now, imagine if we've been running the Future Freedom Foundation for some 21 years, and in our first year we were calling for the end of income taxation. But let's just keep it simple and say 10 years ago that we had abolished the income tax. Along with all the stuff the income tax funds, the empire, the drug war, the welfare state, the Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and so forth. And I'm talking about abolishing Social Security, taxes, FICA, the whole shebang. Let's say we had done that 10 years ago, and you're sitting with, let's say you pay an average in your family, or you pay an average of $20,000 a year in taxes. Today, you would be sitting, assuming you hadn't spent it, you'd be sitting in your house with $200,000 in savings. Now imagine if all of a sudden today you had $200,000 sitting in your bank account. That's a nice little nest egg for anybody. And that's what you would have if there had been no income taxes. Now, what would you do with that money? Well, you'd possibly go out and spend some of it. If somebody just gave you $200,000 right now, or you inherited $200,000, you might go out and buy yourself a new car. You spend $30,000 or so. You might take a vacation, spend $5,000 there. You might go out and upgrade your electronics, and let's say you spend $50,000. Well, you still got $150,000, and you sock that away in savings, and it starts earning interest. Now, and that's essentially what happened when people, didn't have an income tax and no mandatory welfare state. They kept everything they earned. They consumed some of it, but they plowed their money into savings, a large portion of their money into savings. Now, what does that mean? You take your savings and let's say you put it in a bank. Now, let's say you're working for a company, and that company says, you know what, I'm interested in increasing my revenues and increasing my profits. And the way I'm going to do this is by increasing my sales, and one way I can do that is by making a better product and more of a better product, making my workers more productive with what they got. So your employer says, I'm going to go out and buy some better equipment, better computers, better tools, and that's going to, let's say, double everybody's production. So where does he get the money to do this? Well, he goes to the bank. And he says to the banker, I'd like to borrow $150,000 to upgrade my equipment. And the banker says, well, by the way, we just have the money available for you. One of our depositors just deposited $150,000 in savings. We're going to lend it to you. So the guy goes out and he buys the equipment, and you as the worker there, you become more productive. And so let's say you double production, you and all the rest of the workers, and that means the employer's making more money. Well, guess what? Now he's got more money to pay you. So all of a sudden you see your real wages rise in terms of real purchasing power. Now, does he do this out of the benevolence of his heart? No, because there's other businesses doing the same thing, and you are checking around seeing what other businesses are paying, or you're thinking about maybe starting your own business. So to keep the worker through the process of competition, he's got to pay that higher wage. But notice that everybody's benefiting here. The worker's benefiting, the employer's benefiting, the banker's benefiting. There is a harmony of interests that are taking place here. Everybody's standard of living is increasing here. And that's the importance of savings and capital in a society. That's why the standard of living of people like from Americans from 1870 to 1900 was skyrocketing, absolutely skyrocketing. In fact, I read one place some time ago where they said real wages doubled in one 20-year period and then doubled again. Now we're talking about real purchasing power here, because remember, there was no Federal Reserve, no paper money. Money was gold and silver coins and copper coins, and so people had the value of their money wasn't being debased and depreciated and devalued like it is now with the Federal Reserve. So this is the key to a free and prosperous society. I mean, liberals are always saying, we want to help the poor, we want to help the poor. But you see, what they haven't figured out is what libertarians have figured out, that there is a key to ending poverty. And that key is the unhampered market economy. The economy where people are free to keep everything they earn, decide what to do with it. I mean, it's sort of counterintuitive. I mean, you got to think. Remember the very first show I put on here? I said that as a libertarian, you got to think, you got to get the gears moving. Well, the liberals don't have the gears moving. They're all frozen up there. They need some head oil, where you go to Costco and you ask the official there, the agent, hey, I'd like some head oil. And they go in the back because nobody buys this stuff, and they give you a little pint of head oil, and this is what liberals need to do. And you need to go home, and you tilt your head, and you put some of that oil in your ear, and it gets into your ear, and then, it starts, getting those gears moving. You've seen gears that are all frozen up. Well, that's what head oil is all about. And that's what liberals need, because their gears up here are all frozen up. But this is the key to abolishing poverty. To ending poverty is a dynamic society where government plays no role in managing the economy, no role in fighting poverty. You see, in order to end poverty, you got to stop government from fighting poverty. That's the cause of the poverty. That if you have an unhampered market economy, this is why the poor from all over the world were flooding American shores throughout the 1800s, because they were leaving the lands of control, of managed economies, of interventionist governments. They were coming to the land where people were free, with the exception of slavery and other exceptions like that, but where by and large the average person was free to accumulate wealth, engage in transactions, trade with others, and so forth. Again, with exceptions like slavery, tariffs, and so forth. But here's the key to a dynamic society. Now, what does this society produce? What does it look like? We don't know. Now that sort of answers that guy's question that sent me that email. Jacob, what's a libertarian society look like? What's it produce? We can't tell you. And that's what makes our job so difficult. Because you see, what happens is that you've got all these people, millions of people, each planning his own life. There's no central planner, no government manager of the economy. Each person's planning his own affairs, keeping his own wealth, deciding how much I'm going to give to charity, how much I'm going to save, how much I'm going to spend. They're dovetailing their plans with everybody else. The result of this dynamic society, unplanned by government, in which it's self-planned, produces a result that what Friedrich Hayek, the Austrian Nobel Prize-winning libertarian economist, called the results of human action, but not of human design. In other words, things come into existence that no one even conceived of, that nobody planned, that everybody's shocked about. It's like this surprise, like, my gosh, did you hear what somebody just invented, what somebody just produced? I mean, that's why life in the late 1800s must have been very exciting, early 1900s. I mean, inventors were coming up with stuff, the automobiles, the airplane, and all these things were coming into existence. Nobody had conceived of these things. Nobody had imagined them. That's the dynamics of an unhampered market society. There's a book that I highly recommend. I'm sure many of you, most of you, have heard of Frederick Bastiat, the 19th century French legislator. Well, there's nobody better out there than explaining the dynamics of the free market and an unhampered market economy than Frederick Bastiat. Not perfectly, because he was a classical economist. He was still, suffering under the labor theory of value, and you can see that in his works. But by and large, this man had an insight into free markets that is just phenomenal. And I highly recommend his book, Natural Harmonies, because what he's talking about there is that, contrary to what the Marxians would say, after Bastiat, that there is this inherent conflict, and you hear this from the liberals today, inherent conflict between the rich and the poor, and employers and employees, and bankers and customers, and it's all nonsense. There's a natural harmony that exists among people. That it is in the interest of the employee and the employer to have a successful firm, a firm that's raising its revenues, raising its profit levels, because that's the way that the wages then start rising. And so you start to see this dynamic of where people are accumulating wealth, they're saving money, that's going into capital. The capital is being borrowed by the employers. They're making workers more productive, and all of a sudden you see a standard of living that's rising. Now, that's not to say that life is perfect. Sure, there's people going broke. You have what the economist Schumpeter called creative destructionism. I mean, there's businesses going out of business. It means people have to retrain. They have to find a new job. They have to find new opportunities. I mean, it's the dynamics of life. The government's not there to keep things stable, and this is the change that is an inherent part of life. For example, the buggy whip industry. The automobiles comes into existence, and the buggy whip makers are going to get hurt. They're going to go out of business. So people that are making buggy whips have to move into something else. But the automobile industry is producing all these opportunities for the people that were in the buggy whip industry. Same thing with the candle makers. They got hurt when the incandescent light bulb was invented. But you see, this dynamism is producing things the likes of which nobody can predict. There's another little great essay I'd like to recommend to you, and that's an essay that Leonard Reed, the president of the Foundation for Economic Education for many years, the founder of the foundation, he's deceased now. He wrote a great little essay called iPencil, and you can see it online. Just Google iPencil, Leonard Reed, R-E-A-D, and Reed's thesis here was he gave the biographical tree of the pencil. Get it? Biographical tree. Right. Okay. Well,
what the pencil was saying is that nobody knows how to make me. That was the thesis of the piece, that nobody knows how to make a pencil. As simple a thing as a pencil. That, like the lead, which I think, if I recall correctly, isn't really lead at all. It's made off in some country in Africa, let's say, and if they produce it in certain ways that only they know how to do. And then there's the wood that's produced in a forest, somewhere else, like in Europe or whatever. And then there's the rubber, and that comes from, out some island out in the Pacific or something, and then a little metal around it. So everybody's doing all these little things, each is on his own way, not because he's thinking, I'm doing this because I'm making a pencil. It's because he sees a job opportunity. They look at prices for little rubber things, and they say, let's produce these things. People are offering these things, money for these things. And so all of a sudden you've got all these things coming together, but nobody knows how to make all of them, and they come together in the form of a pencil. So in other words, the free market is this intricate, complex system that involves individual actors all over the world that are using the price system to manage their affairs, to control their affairs. They see the price of something rising, and they say, okay, I'm going to produce more of it. They don't have to know why the price is rising. They just have to know the price is rising and say, hey, this is why, when you've got government interdicting this system, with artificially low interest rates, what the Fed does sometimes, or flooding the market with new paper money. It alters the price system. It alters the information transmission system of the free market. And it creates chaos. This is what produces these bubbles and balloons. They orient people into one sector over here thinking, oh, wow, prices are rising, I'm going to produce more. Well, it wasn't that people wanted more of them. It was because the Fed was over there tampering with the system. To answer this guy's question, you end up with a society the likes of which nobody can imagine, but it's a prosperous society. It's a dynamic society. It's an exciting society. And now, can we guarantee that it's a charitable society? Of course not. This really frustrates statists sometimes, when they say, well, what if nobody gives? What if nobody gives? And a conservative hit me with this the other day on a talk show. And I said, why do you consider yourself such a selfish person that you wouldn't give? And he goes, oh, no. He says, I'm not talking about myself. I'm a good person. I would do it. And I said, oh, so you're a good person, but no one else is. That's right. You can't trust people. Well, yeah, you can trust him, but not anybody. Well, if you add up all the people that say that I'm a good person, but nobody else is, you're already talking about, like hundreds of millions of people, because everybody feels that way. But you see, libertarians say you can't force people to be good. But we have faith, we have conviction that people do care about others. That that if there's a young kid that needs an education and his parents are dirt poor, and somebody starts a scholarship fund for him, that they'll go to the local Rotary Club, and people will donate to causes like this. Gosh, even just recently you see all these billionaires that are committing half their fortunes to charity. And please don't tell me they're doing it for an income tax deduction. They don't need income tax deductions at that level. The point is that even people that are at the lower end of the scale, you go into any church in the land. I grew up in Laredo, Texas, where everybody's so poor, and you go into church and you see all these poor people put money into the basket and stuff. Most everybody does care enough to say, I'm going to help others when others need help. And that's the only kind of charity that matters. It's the only thing that matters in life. The voluntary charity, this stuff of Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and foreign aid to dictators and all the bank bailouts and junk, it's all junk because it's all based on coercion. So that's what a free market libertarian society would look like. As one final example, you look at the Postal Service. Now here you got this giant monopoly. It is a monopoly. It's really funny to see statists, exclaim against big business and big business, like Microsoft. Well, if Microsoft doesn't satisfy its consumers, it goes out of business, not the Postal Service. They never exclaim against the Postal Service, even though it's this big monopoly. It's a formal monopoly. You can't compete against the Postal Service in the delivery of first-class mail. If you do, you will get sent to jail. Okay, they'll hold you in contempt after they order you to stop. Now, what would it look like if you got rid of the Postal Service and you opened up the mail delivery to the free, unhampered market economy? The libertarian answer? We don't know. We can't tell you. All we can tell you is that the free market produces the best of everything. I mean, we can sit here and brainstorm about how mail would be delivered, but I guarantee you, in the dynamics of the market economy, where people are free to plan their own affairs and now, put their minds to creative activities, the mail would be delivered in a way that none of us can imagine. That's what freedom does. All right, let me move into this WikiLeaks controversy. I mean, because this is really a fascinating controversy. It really goes to show it's one of these dividing lines between libertarians and statists. Some of the other dividing lines, like the drug war. You can always tell a statist, just say, where do you stand on the drug war? And if he favors it, he's a statist. Okay? Now, that's not to say that just because you favor drug legalization that you're not a statist. You still may be a statist in favor of drug legalization, but it's a litmus test as far as, just generally speaking. Well, it looks like one of these other dividing lines now that's forming is this WikiLeaks thing. I mean, the conservatives are just going ballistic that, oh man, this is just horrible that this guy has released these documents. He's disclosed what the government's been doing. But you know what's really interesting? They're not criticizing the New York Times, you see, because what WikiLeaks has done is really no different in principle from what the New York Times has done. WikiLeaks received the information, and they published it, by publishing it, by giving it to the Times. Well, the Times received the information. They didn't have to publish it, but they chose to do so. And yet the statists, they're going after WikiLeaks. They're even calling for the conservatives are calling for assassinating this guy. Can you imagine? But they don't dare do it because, you see, that's out of the realm of respectability. If you go after the New York Times and you talk about assassinating the editors of the New York Times, it's okay to assassinate, a foreigner like that heads up WikiLeaks, but boy, can't call for assassinating Americans. Well, except for that American overseas that they're calling for assassinating. Well, nobody's ever accused a conservative of being consistent. But let me read you what was really a fascinating section from the New York Times, and this is a columnist named David Brooks, who's a famous conservative, mainstream columnist. This is what he says in his first paragraph talking about this WikiLeaks thing. This is fascinating. He says, Julian Assange's mother did not enroll him in local schools because she feared that formal education would inculcate in him an unhealthy respect for authority. Now, he's not looking at that as something good. Brooks is looking at that as something bad. Here's a mother that says, I'm not going to send my kids into the public schools because what they do in those public schools is they produce a healthy respect for authority. I don't want my kid to be raised that way. Brooks is saying that there's something wrong with that lady, that she's weird, that she's not in the mainstream, that she's out on the fringe. I mean, he doesn't say that, but that's his implication. He's saying that that's something bad, which is absolutely fascinating because that's the mainstream statist mindset. I mean, y'all know that I've talked about public government schooling in the past, and I really haven't focused in on it in any of these shows yet, and I intend to do that. I intend to talk about government schooling as a system. But tonight, what I'd like to do is just focus in on this notion of what the purpose of public schooling is in every country. Cuba, Americans like Brooks. Brooks would say our public schooling system is the backbone of our free enterprise system. So in Cuba, they have public government schooling too, and they teach their children that this is freedom too. In Cuba, they have, now get this, in Cuba they have Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, public schooling, regulations, income taxation, and in Cuba, the kids are taught this is freedom. Well, here again, the kids are taught this is freedom. That's the inside of that box. Remember, freedom and free enterprise, it's a statist box, but everybody inside the box is saying freedom and free enterprise. If you go to a guy like Brooks, I have no doubt that he would say, thank God I'm American, because at least I know I'm free. I got a free enterprise system. I live in a free enterprise system. That I was born and raised in a free enterprise system. Why? Because he is what a public school would be considered an absolute success story. You know, that the respect for authority, the deference to authority, the reverence for the federal government, that for these people, the federal government is everything. It's their provider. It's their sustainer. It gives them their retirement pay, their health care costs. It educates their children. It gives them government business partnerships, SBA loans. It protects them from all the boogeymen in the world. The federal government is their daddy. It's their parent. It's their everything, their big brother. It protects them from all the scary creatures in life. And it's all freedom. And so we've got to revere the government. We have to defer to its authority. And so along comes libertarians. A guy like Julian Assange in his questioning that says, release these things. Show what the empire's all about. It's not a republic, it's an empire. And that's why they need all these secrets, because they're doing bad things. They're doing nefarious things. Well, to a guy like Brooks, this is like blasphemy. This is heresy. This is treason. This is bizarre. Why? Because the federal government is our everything. It's our God. You know, who's going to question God? You just don't do that. And this is the mindset that is inculcated in these public government schools. It's to create the good little citizen, to mold the mind from the first grade on up. You defer to people in authority. You defer to those in Washington. They know what's best. They're the experts. That's why they're in government and you're not, because they know best for you. And therefore, you never question the whole system. You don't question whether this is freedom and free enterprise. You don't question whether this is an empire. No, you sit there. And this is the funny part about conservatives. You go to a conservative conference, a meeting or something, and the first thing they do is pledge allegiance. They pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands. You see, because they've learned that. They got it inculcated. First thing, the bell rings and you're doing the Pledge of Allegiance. And then the very first speaker at this meeting is going to say, Obama's a socialist. Obama's a socialist. What's really funny about this is the guy doesn't even recognize that the Pledge of Allegiance that they just did at this meeting was written by a socialist. Hey, you don't believe me? Google it. Pledge of Allegiance socialist. You'll see that the Pledge of Allegiance was written by a socialist. Well, but notice what they're inculcating in the mind of the student. This is a republic. This is a republic. This is a republic. And I get emails from people sometimes saying, Jacob, this is a republic. Well, it's not a republic. That's not reality. It's an empire. You've got 700 to 1,000 military bases in more than 130 countries. That's a republic. Give me a break. Okay, you call it the Department of Defense. That's just delusionary. That's just to pacify people, to make people think, it's okay, because we're just defending. And you got wars of aggression. You got, look at Iraq. I mean, everybody agrees that Iraq never attacked the United States. But you see, you're not supposed to say that. You're supposed to defer to authority, that they know what's best, that they thought there was WMDs and it was just an honest mistake, and when the WMDs didn't show up, it was just really democracy spreading because we love democracy. Well, except for when we put the Shah of Iran into power or supported the coup in Chile where they put the dictator Pinochet into office, or when, they supported Saddam Hussein in the 1980s. And you see, but you're not supposed to question any of that. This is what Brooks is saying. That you're supposed to revere. You're supposed to have deference for authority, and authority means, of course, the federal government. But notice that the real purpose of keeping all these things secret, that this is what they're mad about, is they're revealing the little nefarious things that the empire does. Because if you have a genuine republic, and you're just minding your own business, and you're just, building a free society here at home, and you're wishing everybody well, but you're not going to invade or regime change or interfere with the affairs of other countries, you don't care whether anybody watches what you're doing. You could have every meeting be public. You don't care. It's all in the up and up. It's when you're doing all these bad things, that's the purpose of the secrecy. to protect the bad things from being disclosed to the citizenry. So the citizenry, Brooks is essentially saying, look, the government's got to do some things that we may not approve of, but look, let's just keep them secret. We don't need to concern ourselves with it. Our conscience doesn't need to be provoked or pricked here. That we can just live our lives. And okay, some people are having to be assassinated. The CIA's having to do some nasty work out there. Yeah, they're having to torture some people, but let's just keep it secret. They're the authorities. They have access to information that we don't have, and you're absolved of any of these sins because you don't know about it. That's what this secrecy is all about. This reverential treatment of government, of the federal government, this deference to authority. And let me tell you the kind of thing they're doing. This is from the New York Times today. This was funny as heck. The New York Times is reporting that this German guy, Helmut Metzner, he's the chief of staff to the foreign minister of Germany. And he had to resign because the WikiLeaks documents reveal that he was spying. He was taking information that was involved in negotiations between the two major parties in Germany. Let's see, the Free Democrats and the Christian Democrats. And they were negotiating power. Well, this guy was spying. He was taking information about the negotiations between these two parties in Germany, and guess who he was giving it to? If you guessed China, North Korea, the Soviet Union, or even Iran, wrong. He was giving it to the United States. Now, it's really funny because these are two supposed allies, but the U.S. has, I don't know if they're paying this guy, probably paying him, why else would he do it, but they're paying him, now, to disclose information secretly to the empire. Now, ask yourself, why would the empire be concerned about, some negotiations within Germany over power sharing? Because this is what the empire does. It involves itself everywhere, all over the world, with foreign aid, money funneled into NGOs to affect elections in democratic countries. What it's doing is trying to put its people in public office. And when the soft means don't work, they'll try assassinations and coups like they did in Iran or Guatemala or Vietnam, even assassinating presidents if they need to assassinate presidents in coups d'etats. If that doesn't work, they got invasions, they got sanctions, they got embargoes. All with this lust for power, for dominance, to police. When you see, like Obama trying to get people in governorships here in the States, ask yourself, why does he care? Why not just let him fight it out? Because it's this lust for power. It's not enough to be the president. He wants all his people in all those states. That's what these federal officials are doing internationally. That's what the foreign policy is all about, to get their people in public office. And then, then the illusion is America is safe. All our people are in public office around the world. Well, it's just delusionary. All they do is create chaos, planned chaos, crises, and perpetual war, perpetual crises, and chaos. Well, if we take the attitude that the Brooks of the world would want us to take, we wouldn't question any of these things. We wouldn't release any of the information about these people. Like their syphilis experiments on Guatemalan citizenry, all that should just be kept secret. The fact that they were providing weapons of mass destruction for Saddam Hussein in the 1980s. You're not supposed to talk about that. Or like take 9/11. Remember when they said, 9/11, 9/11, change the world, change the world. And we said, well, can we look at what the U.S. empire was doing to people before 9/11 that got them so angry and outraged? No, don't criticize the empire. Just this America, history starts on 9/11 forward. Well, libertarians don't buy that. Then you got to look at the whole context of things, and you got to say, what has this government been doing to people? And of course, there was the brutal sanctions where they killed, hundreds of thousands of Iraqi children year after year for 11 years. They had U.S. officials, Madeleine Albright, ambassador to the United Nations, telling the world that the deaths of 500,000 Iraqi children from the sanctions are worth it. This is the kind of thing we need to disclose. We need to disclose calls, Mr. Brooks, the wrongdoing of government, especially since we don't want to live the rest of our lives in this status box. We libertarians want to dismantle this box of statism, both domestically with the welfare state and internationally with the welfare state. And part of opposing this monstrosity is not just to show the immorality of it, it's also to show the reality of it, that this isn't freedom. The freedom is not the welfare state. The freedom is not the controlled society. The freedom is not the imperialistic policeman of the world society. That freedom is where you have the absence of these things, where people are free to manage their own affairs, travel and trade with anybody in the world, including the Cubans, the North Koreans, or whatever, without the control of the U.S. government. Manage your own wealth, handle your own retirement, honor your mother and father on a voluntary basis when they need help. This is what libertarians are about. But it's about independent thinking. It's not about conformity and regimentation. It's about breaking out of that conformity, breaking out of that regimentation, becoming independent thinkers. And this is what, part of why I'm doing this show is to show the importance of independent thinking, of critical thinking, instead of saying, oh, well, the government said it, well, gosh, we can't question it. Oh, no, the government says they're not doing anything wrong, so we can't question that. Nonsense. The government is doing lots of things wrong. It's inherent to a welfare-warfare state, and it's incumbent on those of us that are the independent thinkers, the critical thinkers, to not only disclose the wrongdoing, to expose the empire, to disclose that the emperor has no clothes, and to show the immorality and the wrongfulness of this way of life. By the way, I thought I'd mention to you that we're doing our end-of-year fundraising drive at the Future of Freedom Foundation. For 21 years, we've been battling hard to restore liberty to our land. I think we're really making some progress, not in Washington, but I think out there in the hinterlands, people are questioning things, they're challenging things, and they're not yet there yet, but when people are questioning and challenging, unlike the statists, the conformists that are saying let's not challenge, let's defer to authority. When people are questioning and challenging, there's a good chance they're going to arrive at the solution, which of course is libertarianism, and that's where we come in. We put the ideas out there into the marketplace of ideas. If you don't put libertarian ideas out there, then how is it possible for anyone to ever consider libertarian ideas? A necessary step in this process of achieving a free society is the introduction of the ideas out into the marketplace. And that's what we do. We present this uncompromising moral, philosophical, and economic case. We set the goal line. We say, there it is. There's your goal line for what a free society would look like, what we're striving to achieve, what I've talked about tonight. But we can't do it without those of you that help us out with donations. They're tax deductible. Now, granted, we're trying to get rid of the income tax. We're trying to put ourselves out of business ultimately, because our goal is to achieve a free society. But in the meantime, you can deduct the donations. We're a nonprofit foundation, but we rely on your support. Of course, it goes without saying we don't get any government support, but all our support comes from just individuals and little family foundations and trusts and stuff. We also get bequests. If you'd consider adding this to your will, that'd be great. It's a great thing to think about. But we depend on your support. The money we receive here at the end of the year is what gets us through another year of battling for liberty. We love what we do here in life. We get to battle the wrongdoing of the welfare-warfare state, and we battle for a free society. But we need your support, and I know I get talk to many of you. By the way, for $250 and above, you get a Freedom Club. You get a monthly video, a message from me, a little live videos most of the time, and we're giving a little roll-up blanket, an FFF roll-up blanket. It's really nice. Kind of put it in your car in case of an emergency or whatever. It says the Future of Freedom Foundation on it. And I've talked to several of you that have donated, and y'all say, hey, look, we don't have the time to do what you're doing, but we can support you. And that's great. It's a nice little partnership. We're out here putting out the ideas, you're helping fund the operations, and That's how we get a free society. Now, that doesn't let y'all off the hook by any means. You got to still get out there yourselves spreading the freedom philosophy. You can't just say, oh, well, FFF is doing it, I don't need to do it. No, you got to do it too, whenever the occasion arises. Letters to the editor, letters to your congressman, whatever, talking to your friends and neighbors, forwarding them articles. So anyway, I hope you'll take a look at that fundraising letter. It's online on our FFF email update. Thank you very much. Had a great time with you again this week, and look forward to doing it again next week. Thanks so much, and you guys have a very merry, happy holiday season. Bye-bye.